There's a famous text in the Talmud called Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, and it's sort of the ethical aphorisms, the favorite quotes of rabbis over a period of several hundred years. And one of the rabbis is a man named Ben Zoma, who liked to ask provocative questions and then liked to provide even more provocative answers. For example, he asked, who is wise? And the answer is, Halomed mikol adam, one who learns from everyone. So a wise person is not necessarily just one who's always teaching people, but it's one who's always open to learning. Because if you're always just trying to teach, at a certain point you're just going to be recycling your material. You're not acquiring new material. A person who's open to learning from every encounter, that's really going to become a person of great wisdom. Who is a hero? Ezu Gabor, who is a strong person, one who can overcome his inclinations, and the rabbis seem to be referring to as evil inclinations, though it means, the struggle with ourselves, because the rabbis understood the hardest struggle in which every human being engages is with himself, and to have to learn and know what are your weaknesses and what do you have to struggle with every day, because otherwise you can go through life hurting people. A third question there, though, is who is rich? And this, I find, the answer is both provocative and probably among the hardest teachings in Judaism to absorb, and most people learn to absorb it only when it's a little too late. Who is rich? Hasameach bechelko, one who is happy with what he or she has. It is very hard for most of us to practice that teaching, because most of us have a tendency to think, if I only had this, I'd be happier. But there are so many areas in which we can be provoked to unhappiness. If my spouse was different in this regard, then I would be happy. If my children were different in this regard, or achieved this sort of success, then I'd be happy. If my income level rose by a certain amount, then I would be happy. In fact, studies have routinely found that no matter how much people are earning, except maybe in the stratospheres of tremendous wealth, but even there it probably applies, no matter how much people are earning, most people have a tendency to think that if they were earning about another 25 or 30%, then they would really be happy. So it's very, very hard to fulfill this teaching. But now let me tell you what's sad. As a rabbi, I often am exposed in dealing with people to whom terrible tragedies have occurred. It could be a death. It could be a very bad injury that's been sustained, an illness from which there's not going to be a recovery. In other words, it's losses that are more in the realm of the irrevocable. And a sad thing that sometimes happens is people will say to me, or poignant, will say to me, Rabbi, if things could only go back to being the way they used to be, I would be so happy. But I knew those people when things were the way they were used to be, and they weren't happy. So what's tragic is there are people who can only experience what happiness is when they no longer have it. But the world often will break our hearts. And therefore, if we can't learn to appreciate happiness while we're having it, we're never going to be happy. So that's why this teaching is one we have to struggle with every day of our lives. I am not in any way minimizing it. I'm not just throwing it out as if it's something easy. Oh, you want to be rich? Be happy with what you have. It is something we have to struggle with. And even if we sometimes have to just imagine in our minds what it would be like to not have these things, we all know it. We could be walking along in a bad mood and then suddenly face the possibility of suffering some terrible loss in our health or terrible loss in our family. And then immediately we'll think, oh, if things could only go back to the way they were, I could appreciate it. What, after all, is probably the most famous inspirational movie ever made. It's A Wonderful Life, in which a man really wants to die because of terrible things that have happened to him, and we can all empathize with why the character of George Bailey wants to commit suicide. But when he finally comes to realize the good that he has done in his life, and that it's permeated the lives of so many others, and the love that people experience from him, he's very willing to absorb those other losses because he realizes that the life that he has dismissed as a failed life has really in many, many ways been a wonderful life. We have to have that perspective. That's what will help bring us to a feeling of who is rich, one who is happy with what he or she has.